There has been much debate as to whether Christ's parables were literal, symbolic truth, based in fiction, pure invention, or something else entirely. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus is one such parable that has created questions and controversy as to its meaning. While it seems a bit unreal, it is actually drawn from daily Jewish life. And to the first century Jewish listener, it made perfect sense. Now, just to give you perspective, if you haven't thought of it this way, Jesus lived in the first century. Okay? Around the second century BC, so this is roughly 200 years, 300 years before Jesus, idioms crept into the Jewish language and became accepted as manner of speech. So what is an idiom? All right? They have a very good explanation of what an idiom is. An idiom is an expression with a non-literal meaning. It is often colorful and has a unique meaning that cannot be understood from the usual meanings of any of the other words in the expression. And here's a fantastic example of an idiom. I haven't been able to think of one better. Such as, it's raining cats and dogs. All right? Does anybody in this day and age who has heard that expression, raining cats and dogs, you know what it means. It means it's raining heavy. Do you think that if you wait for it to rain hard enough, or maybe the stronger the hurricane comes, the heaviest downpour that could ever happen would literally be raining down cats and dogs, the animals from the sky? Of course not. That's absurd. Okay? So, it's raining cats and dogs is an idiom, and so was Abraham's bosom. Now, let's get a little bit more detail on that. All right? By the 1st century AD, the Jews had adopted the Roman custom of dining while reclining on couches. Guests at the feast leaned themselves on one elbow while resting back of their head against the chest of the guest behind them. Now I'm going to stop there and interject. So what we have here is we have a mixture of, as we're going to see, Jewish figures of speech and things like that, and Roman customs of the Romans of the day, mixing into the daily life of the Jews. But here we are in the 21st century, and we don't understand these things. We read it and don't do the research on these idioms, and we think we know then what Luke 16 is saying. As we're going to find out, I think you'll be quite surprised at what it doesn't say. All right. Guests at the feast leaned themselves on one elbow while resting the back of their head against the chest of the guest behind them. And a guest who rested their head against the host's bosom dined in the place of honor. The Jews called this dining position resting in the bosom of Abraham. Were they literally resting in the bosom of Abraham? No. Abraham was dead hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before this. Over 1,000 years before this. The phrase reminded them of their Jewish belief that someday, at the final reward, they would all feast in honor with their father Abraham. At some point, the idiom Abraham's bosom became synonymous with heaven. Notice it became synonymous with it. It's not doctrine. It's not from the Bible. The place of final reward, the place of the eternal feast. Okay? Now, I'm not going to get in here with what the Pharisees believed versus Jesus on life and death. It doesn't matter. But what does matter is that they saw this as a symbolic thing of, oh, okay, when I'm such a good Jew, so to speak, I guess, that maybe I will be able to dine with Abraham in Abraham's bosom. I will get the place of high honor. All right? Just because the Roman custom and the Jewish customs here kind of mixed, and their hopes and desires, does not make it biblical. We cannot make a dogmatic statement like, okay, Abraham's bosom means, okay, that's a place where we will go while we're waiting for Jesus to complete all the things on earth. Then we go and be with him. And all the other crazy, strange things I've heard about the bosom of Abraham and Abraham's bosom. Please wake up, people, and realize that when you read this now, Abraham's bosom is nothing but an idiom, a figure of speech. If you want to make that into dogma, then you're making a big mistake. You're creating a foundation that is extremely shaky. You're taking the sayings of people and making it into a dogmatic statement. And I could actually say then, if I wrote, if the statement raining cats and dogs was in the Bible, I'm sure that people that didn't understand that expression 5,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now, whatever, would say, oh, the Bible prophesied that it's going to rain cats and dogs one day. That's a prophecy. And we know that's ridiculous because we're living in that time period. Let's stop making assumptions with doctrine because we're getting all screwed up and fouled up. And I could go much deeper than this to show how foolish it would be to think that we would go, or anybody would go, to Abraham's bosom. All right? Totally foolish when you really want to sit down and look it out and work it out side by side with Scripture. It becomes ludicrous, that belief that has anything to do with heaven or anything at all. Okay? He was trying to make a point. Nowhere else in the Bible do we find Abraham's bosom. And the Bible tells us that you need to have 2 or 3 witnesses to establish, anything. You want to establish a doctrine, a belief, you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses. And this is a perfect example of people jumping in with one witness and making a doctrine out of it. How foolish now does it seem to think that Abraham's bosom has anything to do with heaven or a place that people go after they die? Not unless you want to remain in denial, and I know some will. I know some they want to stay there. They want to close the book at page 7. I hope everybody here is not willing to get stuck into that, but please remember that. If there's only one witness in the Bible, you please learn that there's a reason why in many places it was told you need 2 or 3 witnesses to establish anything. All right? We've been making that mistake with Abraham's bosom. God bless everyone. We'll talk soon.